Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Full of Human Connections, podcast. I'm your host, King, and I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. It's as I always say, it's a morning speaking to you is a good morning. So I'm happy to be here.
Appreciate that, and I concur as well. And I'll segue right into my gratitude. Grateful for my life, my health, the ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind. Grateful for another 24 hours to pursue my purpose in life. A mother who's alive and have sound mind, and I get still to enact and gain her wisdom and sharing her energy and love. And also grateful for the ability to learn something new. I'm really appreciating the opportunity to learn something new on a daily basis. And I'm really mesmerized, I should say, it's mesmerized, but more, I'm really impressed with the new tools that come out that allow you to work more efficiently and more effectively. And, so that's why it's a plus this week's technology, because I'm just learning some great things. I'm just really blown away at the capabilities of what these things can do to help make my business and my life easier. And my goal is to share that with others so they can see the benefit of these tools as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so my standard response to this remains I'm really grateful for indoor plumbing and electricity, especially as it allows me to have fresh food in a refrigerator that, for the most part, doesn't fail. And then, as you said, just to keep learning and growing and knowing that there are other perspectives that I'm not yet aware of, and that can help me become increasingly grounded, increasingly whole, and perhaps help others, which is my life's work as an educator, a writer, and a coach. Perhaps help others increase their own perspectives and become increasingly grounded and whole and integrated as well. So I'm grateful for that, and for the most part, my brain and my body, and the brain is part of the body, seem to be working reasonably well as I approach another birthday at the end of this month. So I'm grateful for all of that.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Well, you want to walk us into our topic for today?
Yeah, sure. So, as some of you know, we've been speaking for coming up on 1 year now. It'll be 1 year in June. We've been speaking about my book, Healing America's Narratives, the subtitle of which is The Feminine, the Masculine, and Our Collective National Shadow. And we've been walking through the 12 chapters. And today we're still in the 12th chapter. We're going to go back to something that was introduced in the first chapter of the book, and which is one of the missing ingredients for truly healing America's narratives. And that's the word, the word is love, but it's not the word that's missing, because it's on every Hallmark card, and a lot of people throw it around, but it's the actual practice of it. And in the first chapter of the book, I point to three, you could call them definitions or conceptualizations of love that have been helpful to me for the last 20 to 30 years. I'm just going to say them out loud now, and then as we talk, I'll introduce two or three more that show up in chapter 12 as well from some other sources. But the three conceptualizations of love that really moved me, in no particular order, from a Benedictine monk, Brother David Steindl-Rast, in his book Gratefulness. He described love as the joyful acceptance of belonging. Means you joyfully accept belonging, either with yourself, that's self-love, with another person in an intimate relationship, with your family, with your friends, your colleagues on the planet. So love can be manifested. You can belong to a lot. So the joyful acceptance of belonging is one way to look at love. The second way comes from the late M. Scott Peck, who wrote his first book back in the 70s, was entitled The Road Less Traveled. It was one of the earliest books that intersected spirituality with psychology. He was a psychiatrist by training. And in the book, he described love as the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of pieces to that. Just really briefly, he makes it clear that love is a choice. So it's the will to extend oneself. It could be a feeling too, but there's a certain willfulness to love. I commit to loving, and it shows up by being willing to extend myself, to go beyond what's comfortable, in order to grow myself or somebody else spiritually. And then the final one comes from Marianne Williamson, who's been a teacher and an activist for decades now. And some folks might remember her as a Democratic candidate in the primaries for the 2020 election. And she got enough signatures to get into the early debates. And she reflected on love in her book, A Return to Love, that it's the absence of fear. So if you can imagine what it's like to live in a moment or many moments where you have no fear or worry or anxiety in your body. So you're not worried about anything, which is hard to do in this third decade of the 21st century, everywhere on the planet, and definitely in the United States. But if you can get to that place even momentarily and feel what the lack of fear feels like, she basically says what's left there then is love. Love is always there. Other things just tend to block it. So to just summarize, joyful acceptance of belonging, the will to extend oneself for one's own or another spiritual growth, and the absence of fear. If you take those three together, joyfully accepting belonging, willingness to go beyond what's comfortable, and having no sense of fear, that seems to me like a pretty good place from which to live, a place of love. And we can all use it. I know I can. So that's our starting point today, this idea of love in the context of healing America's narratives.
I think that's an excellent topic, as I believe that, love is the most powerful energy that we can create and manifest, that all of us are attracted to. The Russian psychologist Sorkin, he said love is the single most powerful and potent source for influencing and changing behaviors. So I've often studied the word love from a lot of different perspectives, and the quotes you share in your book, in the cases that you reference in your book, are also something that was definitely a different path that I had looked at love. One of the things I always felt that helped me really begin to see love differently was, again, the book that I constantly reference, read from on a daily basis. It's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Stephen R. Covey talks about, and he was the first time I heard this reference. I've heard it many times since, or maybe I didn't catch it as well as I did with his book. But he talked about love being an action. So he talks about a couple saying how I don't love my husband anymore. And I'm having difficulty loving this. And he said, well, you need to love your husband. She said, well, that's what I'm saying. I don't love him. So when you're looking at love, it's a noun. Love should be a verb. Love's an action. So love in that context, love on them. And that really helped me begin to look at love differently in the context of the energy of love. And I talk about that even in my book, that the importance of connecting with intent. With the inner energy of love is where we all want to be. And, as you know, the Christian Bible references love is ascending to God. So love is definitely a powerful connecting energy source that I say, like, we all want to be a part of. We all want to experience it. We write about it. We sing about it. We think about it. We, hope for it in everything that we bring about. And so now, with that being said, let me ask this question. In the context of healing America's narratives, how do you feel that love is something that is at a from your context of progressively moving along to become more fully human, is love the starting point or the end destination, or is it the yeah, that's what I want to ask. Is it the ending destination you want to get to, or is it the starting point that you got to have in your life before you begin on the journey? What would you say?
Yeah, I love that question. And so I don't have a set answer to that, but in the context of your asking, I would say it's both, in the sense of love being ever present. In fact, I like to argue that love is what created, the universe. Call it what you want. Creation, the universe. I'm looking outside. I'm lucky enough to see some trees, and it's a nice day. A nice day. But even love created the rain too, and the storms and all that. So I think that love is ever present. So it's there at the beginning, and it is definitely an end point where we would like to arrive at. But a lot of things get in the way of its full manifestation of, as you say, of engaging love as an action. So it takes me back to the aspects of the collective national shadow of America. Among them are, I'm not going to list all of them, but ignorance, arrogance, fear, bigotry, violence. If you're ignorant, if you're arrogant, if you're afraid, if you're bigoted, and if you're violent, those all kind of get in the way of love, because it's joyful acceptance of belonging, the will to go beyond what's comfortable to help myself or somebody else, and to live without fear. Again, ignorance, arrogance, fear itself, bigotry, violence, those greed, those all get in the way of love. So I say to your question, and again, I'm thinking out loud here. Yeah, it's a beginning point. It's there. It's a desired endpoint. It's there from the beginning to the end. And the work is to get rid of the things. Now, and let me rephrase that, because we don't want to get rid of those things. We want to recognize them, honestly realize that we have them. We have fear, we have bigotry, we have ignorance. Everybody's ignorant of something. And then to integrate that. So I'm a fully human being. So it's not like, oh, those people are the ignorant ones, or those are the bigoted ones, or that's the violent ones over there. And there are levels of it, of all those things. But I have all of that in me. And I can choose to recognize it, integrate it, and not have it hidden so it impacts me. And just say, oh, I'm just fully human. And I'm choosing now to take Scott Peck's definition. I'm exercising my will, and to move it into your depiction of Stephen Covey's defining love as an action. So I'm going to extend myself now in the act of love. I'm going to take actions that are loving. So I think it's there, and we need to make it primary. There was not love, and I'm going to just go back to the quick history lesson that you and I have been talking about. There was not love of the European explorers turned colonizers when they kidnapped Africans from their homes and brought them across the ocean and then enslaved them. There was not love when they encountered the indigenous peoples of what we now call the Americas, took their land, wrote treaties, betrayed the treaties, took their children away and put them into Christian schools to acculturate them into the American way of being. None of that was grounded in love. It was based in fear and ignorance, really. So we have a lot more knowledge now. We know more now than the somewhat ignorant explorers from Europe in the 14th and 15th and 16th centuries had. That's not to excuse their behavior, but it's to put it in a historical context. And some of us have some wisdom. Hopefully we get some wisdom as we're using our knowledge. But love is there. The fear and ignorance and bigotry really get in the way of it, in my experience.
I think I have a microphone problem. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, your voice is a little bit low, but I can hear you fine. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna try to speak louder until I get this issue resolved. So that brings another question. As you talk about in your book, can the healing process begin in the absence of love?
Hmm. Um, yeah, that's a good one. And so my guess is yes, because as I speak about healing, and I'm really clear on this in the book, in Healing America's Narratives, that healing begins with coming to terms with things as they are. So even if I'm not a fully loving person yet, but I have some level of honesty, that I'm not out there deliberately telling lies and falsehoods. I'm trying to be honest. Um, the first step in healing, moving towards wholeness, is coming to terms with things as they are. So if I'm willing to look honestly at how things are in my life, in my family, in my community, in my political party, in my whatever, my place of work, my place of worship, my country, my planet, I can begin that healing process, even if I'm not a fully loving person yet. And my take on that is the more I heal, the more I come to terms with things as they are. So I become increasingly whole because I'm taking in, oh, that's true. That's true. I didn't realize that was true. That's part of me now. That's also true. That's how things are. Um, my capacity for and my propensity for love has fewer obstacles in the way as I get increasingly honest in my worldview. So that's me riffing. I love these first two questions are great. I haven't thought of them before. So yeah, you're putting me to work this morning.
Well, good, good.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, love is such a powerful word, and the way, in my opinion, we use love in our society, people see it typically in a romantic sense only.
Hmm.
And that's how it's usually defined in the movies and the songs and a lot of poetry, but popular poetry. But if there's other poetry, some of the poets like Rumi get deeper and I think get to the original source of what love is really all about. I think that again, looking at the topic of today and the question, what does love have to do with it? Of course, takes me back to the Tina Turner song, "What Love Has to Do with It."
Hmm.
When I read that, that's the first thing that took me back to her song, and I remember the first time I heard her that song title. I thought it was a very interesting thing because it was like the way I took it and watching the movie. It was saying as well, I can have this wonderful life, and I don't have to worry about love. Because what does love have to do with the things I've been able to achieve and overcome, and where I am at now in my life? So what does love really gain me? That's how I took it. I don't know if that was her intention, but that's how I interpreted it, which I didn't really like as much. But now, saying it now, and as a person who spends this efforts and time always thinking about how to understand human behaviors
Right.
and understanding human behaviors, the goal, like I said, when you're building connections, the purpose of understanding human behaviors is to build connections, and then to inevitably get to the point where a connection of love is there. And again, not the romantic sense of love, but love, the energy of, as you say, bringing out the spiritual essence of a person, bringing out I think when you're in love, whether it's romantic love or just the ideal love, you are in that energy and you're allowing it to just flow through you. It's something about you from an attraction standpoint. I'm not talking about physical attraction. I'm talking about the energy that you are emulating. It's just something that really makes other people want to connect with that. They want to be around you. They want to tap into that energy source that you have. And that's the beautiful thing about love. And 9 times out of 10, even when artists sing about love, they sing about it with such a graceful appreciation and admiration for the word love and the energy that it brings. You can even see it how people, when they talk about it, it brings a smile to their face because they're reflecting on either a past experience that they can think of how they've experienced love. Maybe it's from a parent, a previous relationship, romantic, or just the ideal of serving someone because you love humankind. As you progress to become fully human, you say, I love to serve. And when I see that someone has felt great gratitude for my efforts of being served, then I really feel the essence of love really through me.
Yeah, that's just beautiful, and I love that the way you touched on, because there are different types of love. There's the love that a mother has for a child. There's a love that a spouse has for a spouse, or significant other has for a significant other. Um, there's the love that it's possible someone like, I would say Gandhi or the Dalai Lama, perhaps, or others, spiritual leaders who have, Dr. King, who love humanity, it seems, who really do love at that level. The fraternity, like my oldest friend, guy's a year younger than me, grew up together in Yonkers. He lives in Houston, Texas now. And we're in touch for, we laugh about it. We've been friends for 65 years. And we've been in touch every year of our lives. It's not like we got back in touch. But when we end phone calls, or even if we're leaving, if I visit him or whatever, we always say, we're not shy about it. We just say, I love you. And because we really do. We have, so, there's different manifestations of human love, all of which are appropriate and fine. And it's something that you said, and I'm not going to be able to quote what you said, so I'm not going to try to, towards the end, though, reminded me of something that the author, Jason Reynolds is an author of, award-winning author of primarily books for children and adolescents of color, African-American kids. And he's brilliant and a really kind of grounded guy. And he was being interviewed on the show, the radio show On Being with Krista Tippett, which has been around for, 20 years or so. It's some really great interviews there. And she asked him, and Krista Tippett is a white woman, and she asked him if he could define anti-racism. And she was really kind of tiptoeing around how she asked the question. She was trying to be almost be overly respectful, afraid to say the wrong thing, which is fine. And his answer, because I listened to this thing, I want to just read his answer because it's an excerpt of what he said. And it comes back to what we're talking about, love. So I'm just going to read this piece. It's in the book in chapter 12. So she said, what do you mean by, what's a usable definition for anti-racism? And what Jason Reynolds said was, it's simply the muscle that says humans are human. That's it. It's the one that says, I love you because you are you, period. That's all. That element of I love you because you are you should be the most human thing we know. It should be a natural thing to say, look, I love you because you remind me more of myself than not. So that was his, he responded to the question about anti-racism by talking about love. And it makes perfect sense. It was an amazing, response. And this is, I think I don't know if he's 40 yet. He's pretty young, from where I'm sitting, he's a young guy. But he came right back to love. You remind me more of myself than not. And imagine what a step that would be like for every American to be able to say when they encounter another human being, whether it's a CEO of a major corporation, somebody who's homeless, somebody in another political party, whatever, despite the differences or the identity issues you have with a homeless person or a CEO, you can still see through to the humanity of the person.
Mm.
You remind me more of myself. So that's love. I think that's a manifestation of love. That's that joyful acceptance of belonging to the same species without fear. And I think a really important move that love allows us to make or invites us to make is being willing to be the first one to step in and be vulnerable. So when you have a perceived opponent or enemy, somebody who you think is different or who disagrees with you, being the first one to express some sense of vulnerability or love, because that always risks, if you're doing it in a public space, you could be humiliated or mocked or whatever. But that's real love, because there's no fear there. Okay, I can feel there's risk to this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And it seems as though that's what, at least part of what Jason Reynolds was referring to. And Bell Hooks said something similar. She said that what's missing from all of the movements of the 60s and 70s and 80s, the women's movement, the race movements, civil rights movement, she said what was missing, what was needed was an ethic of love, because every group was just fighting for an end to the domination of their group. So women were fighting for women. People of color were fighting for people of color. So Bell Hooks called them out, and she's, was a woman of color. She passed away last year, I think. But she basically called out black men and white women. She basically said, for all of my black brothers on the front lines of the racial movement, of racial equality, they don't have enough to say about their black sisters who were struggling because of their gender as well. And then she called out the white women, she said, who are on the front lines of gender equality, with me, meaning with Bell Hooks, but they don't have a whole lot to say about their black sisters who are suffering because of race discrimination as well. But she said we need to move beyond just that domination that impacts my group and fight against all of the forces of domination that hurt any human being. And that's what an ethic of love would do. So there's, the models are out there. I mean, we have what we need, but there's just a lot of barriers, in my experience. Fear, greed, ignorance, and arrogance are among them. I just get in the way because I'm afraid I'll lose something. I'm afraid somebody else's equality might hurt me in some way, which is, from where I'm sitting, mindless idiocy. I don't like to say language like that too often. But if you think about it, everyone being equal doesn't affect me in a bad way. It enhances my life. It deepens my life. It makes it more beautiful. So that's, I wish I could remember exactly what you said that brought me to quote Jason Reynolds, but it had to be pretty good for me to use that quote.
Well, I appreciate that. Like I said, love is a topic that once you, at least again from my perspective, once you begin to put yourself on a journey to say, I want to become more fully human, I want to grow, you begin to have a better appreciation of certain words, and love is one. And then you begin to really start studying the word, and then you begin to study it from different perspectives and understanding how it's used in the context, because love can also be used, I believe, incorrectly to describe a feeling that you may have for material items. I love my car, I love money, I love my home, or I love winning. When you put things in that kind of perspective, I think that love is not being used in its proper context. I think people often use love as a synonym for admiration, strong admiration or liking. And the songs and the way our society operates, they don't make it easier, because, they make it. And I think that's why we have so many people who are, again, as you talk about relationships now, romantic relationships, who are not happy because people will say, well, I fell out of love. And I've often debated people that you don't fall out of love. I think that, what it is, you may not like that person anymore, but you don't fall out of love. I don't really think you fall in love either. There's no really anything positive ever about falling. you know. So why would you associate that with love? You know, you fall any other place, there's nothing positive is going to come from falling. So I think you grow in love is where I'm going with that. Mm-hmm. And when you begin to put it in that context, that it's a growth, then you don't expect it all to happen at once. So you can just fall and just be done. I fail, now I'm getting up, right? That can be a quick action and a very quick result. Where when you say I'm growing, that means that's not going to happen quickly. A tree is growing outside. It's not going to be grown. Growing is applying the verb. It's still activity going with it. And I say all that because I think that as we now really begin to look at where we are in today's terms, and you talked about it earlier, that how we need more love in our lives. And I think it has to come from, you know, the general interest of everyday people wanting to be around the energy of love. Like you talked about how you can say I love you to a man and be a straight heterosexual man. I know that sounds weird to say and even hear, but that's how society has created those barriers where we would even look at it in the context. But when you really understand the true essence of the power of the word love and what it means, then it makes sense that you would say that. That anybody that you care about on a very deep level, and that you have this energy about this person, when you think about them, and love is that expression of energy. I love you, and I really care about your well-being, and I want the best for you. Now, I said that context because what I want to know is, and this is something that, of course, the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. always said, love your enemies. And I always felt that's much easier said than done, you know, especially when someone's currently actively being your enemy. Now, if someone's done something to you in the past and they're no longer doing that action to you, I think it's a little easier to say, okay, well, I can probably love that person because I'm not getting that negative energy from that person anymore. But they're actively, as he was walking, marching, and someone's currently shouting in your face, you know, racial epithets and spitting on you or threatening your life, and you can still say, I'm going to love this person. That to me is a growth that I aspire to get to. When you can have that kind of desire and awareness to say, even in this moment of I'm being attacked and I'm feeling my life is threatened, I'm thinking about love for the person that's actually bringing this forth, this energy to me.
Yeah, I mean that example, I love that. Is that even just like that? I love that. I love that was completely unintentional, some subconscious thing there. Not trying to be cute, but I think that's where the idea of love, as we're talking about it, is different from agreeing with or condoning somebody's behavior. So either you love human beings in that, you're capable of loving all of the members of your species, or you're not. If you're, the language you and I have been using, we talk about being me-centric, or it's all about me. Us-centric, it's just my group or my groups. Human-centric. So, in Dr. King's case, loving your enemy, and he was, really clear on this, and we both know this. He didn't say condone racism, condone the fire hoses on the children. Didn't condone the beatings at the lunch counters and of the protesters. But he was still saying you need to love these people because they're human, just like we are. It's a really difficult move to make, especially in the moment when somebody is right here, raising a club up or just saying horrible things or spitting on you, as you said. And that's I understand that intellectually, and I'd like to think I could do it, but I probably couldn't.
Right.
But I think it's grounded in something that that's that Buddha said back, and Buddha pretty much goes Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam. I think that's kind of the chronological order they appeared on the planet. But and this is one of the things I mentioned in the book, is that Buddha is quoted as saying, for hatred can never put an end to hatred. Love alone can. This is an unalterable law. Both Gandhi and Dr. King use slightly edited versions of that. I forget, I don't have written down in front of me in the book exactly what they said, but basically, you don't end violence through violence, you end it by love. You don't end hatred by hatred, you end it by love. So they were consistent on that theme. And that's where I love going back to, and again, I'm not doing that intentionally. One of my largest American heroes, who we lost a couple of years ago, was John Lewis, the late Congressman John Lewis, because he just kept, as Dr. King did, but he just kept going out there, and that, the one famous photograph coming across the Pettus Bridge when he got his skull cracked open. That was one of the many times he got beaten, and he just kept doing it. And when asked, he basically said, for all of us who were working in the civil rights movement through, nonviolence, and I'm going to read a quote from him as well. He made it really clear that nonviolence was practiced, quote, not simply as a tactic, but as a way of authentically living our lives, and that our sole purpose was, in fact, love. So that's again, if you go back to all of these folks who we can look up to, whether it's an author, an activist, leader of the civil rights movement, the founder of Buddhism, he didn't try to found anything. He was just writing down his experiences. They all come back to it. They all come back to love. What each of them meant when he or she said it, who knows? Buddha said that 2,500 years ago, give or take. But it's been this persistent, consistent theme. It maybe we should pay attention to it. It's not like artificial intelligence, or it's not like a bump stock on a weapon. It's not like some other things that are more recent. I'm just being a little bit facetious. It's not like a large widescreen TV. It's been around for a long time, and we don't seem to do particularly well with it.
And again, I go back to say I believe that most people just really don't understand the true definition of what love means. They hear it, it's talked about. It's probably one of the words that's said in common vocabulary maybe 20 times, 30,000 times a day. People use that word. I love my football team. I love this food. I love this way to work. I love my shoes I have on. And you say it in those contexts. And it reminds me of a scripture, from Bible, Proverbs, and talks about how, I can find a quote. It says, Proverbs 21:17, whoever loves pleasure will become poor. Whoever loves wine and perfume will never be rich. And I take that in that context of not understanding the meaning of love. In other words, putting forth the energy towards those material things that don't really bring intrinsic value. So if you're going to value those things, because that's what that's really saying, you put more value there that you're saying, I love it, then you're going to have issues. If you think about love and pleasure, which means that you're going to be more prone to be willing to work less and look for easy ways out, and just always in the mindset of what can I do to make myself feel good, as opposed to understanding that true fulfillment comes from the serving of others. When you really understand that context, like I give you an example just quickly, how I think I may have shared this with you before, but I was driving down the street in Baltimore when I first started coming to Baltimore prior to moving here, and I would drive through the city to get a better understanding of the layout, and I would see homeless people. And Baltimore still has, most corners, homeless people holding signs asking for food or asking for money. And this one gentleman had a sign that said, I want a hamburger. And I had just come from McDonald's, again, using their slogan, I loving it. It's funny, McDonald's. And I had brought 2 burgers, and I had eaten one, and I had a fresh hot burger. I literally in McDonald's, like a block down the street, and I was able to give this gentleman this burger. And so now, for me, that did much more for me than him that day. Now we can debate whether I would question whether he even remembers that. Because people I give him food all day, any day. But for me, that still sticks in my mind. This is years later. Is because of the feeling, the fulfillment it gave me for being able to serve him. Detaching myself from the outcome, not caring about whether or not he was pleased with it or not, which is the fact that I was able to do something kind, something that I believe was beneficial to another human being, and to what you said originally when you talked about the perspective you want to talk about love from it, that you talk about in your book. It tapped into my spiritual growth as well. Again, that's something that money can never give you. I mean, that was the best, $2 I ever spent in my mind, from that context of what it did for me from a spiritual connection and fulfillment context.
Yeah, and what you said was, giving him the burger and not being attached to the outcome. In other words, what you got from just the act of giving was greater than, best $2 you ever spent, but greater than any reaction he might have had. It was the act itself, an act of love, of generosity, that was what was important. It wasn't some outcome. And when you said that, not being attached to the outcome, it reminded me that one of the, I think, truths about truly risking love. And I say risking love because it is risky. In the world in which we currently live, if you truly love, you are going to be betrayed, abandoned, or you're going to betray or abandon somebody else. What I mean by that is, even in the most beautiful, loving relationship, let's say a marriage, just to make it even formally, unless you happen to die simultaneously, one of the partners is going to die before the other, and there's going to be this loss for the surviving partner. That's a heartbreak. Now, different people hold it in different ways, and that, for some people, they can really celebrate if they were married for years and years and years, they just celebrate the life as opposed to grieving a death. But that's not always the case. In other cases, somebody may betray you in a loving relationship. Even if you love fully and you love all human beings, if you love all human beings in the third decade of the 21st century in the United States, by definition, your heart will break every day. Whether it's the most recent shooting, I'll just stop there, because there's going to be shootings every day.
Right.
And some of them are going to be on news. So right there, if you really love humanity, by definition, your heart breaks every day in this country because of what humans do to each other in this country. And there's lots of other examples too. Seeing a horrible car crash, seeing our elected officials bumbling and fumbling and pointing their fingers at each other. That to me is heartbreaking. Not the same heartbreak as a shooting, but it's just, come on, boys and girls, time to put on your big boy and girl shoes and be adults. So risking love, I think, guarantees heartbreak, because there will be loss, betrayal, those two right there, loss and betrayal. And yet the alternative to not love virtually guarantees a life of fear, bigotry, ignorance, arrogance, whatever. So it seems as though risking love is the way to go. I'm sure some people would disagree with that.
No, I agree with you 100%. And it reminded me quickly of You ever heard of Leo Buscaglia?
Oh yeah,
Buscaglia.
the hug doctor.
Well, I came across him by just searching for the word love on YouTube, and of course, he talked about love quite a bit,
Yeah.
and and exercise. But I just want to share this quote because you talked about risk, and this quote came to my mind. This is a quote I saved from him because I thought it was a beautiful expression of the word risk. And he says, "To love is to risk nothing. I'm sorry. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To hope is to risk pain. To try is to risk failure. The risk must be taken because the greatest risk in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, achieves nothing, is nothing, and becomes nothing.
Yeah.
He may avoid suffering and sorrow, but he simply can't learn and feel and grow and love and live. Chained by his certitudes, he is a slave. He forfeited his freedom. Only the person who risks is truly free." And I always thought that was just really a great way of talking about the power of risk and the importance of taking risk, and then love being, as you talked about before, when you are willing to risk giving love to someone, you risk not being able to receive it in return. And I know that for me, throughout most of my relationships romantically, that was one of the things I always felt I can hold back, because the rule I was taught was that the person who loves the least controls the relationship. So if I don't love you as much as this person is loving me, then I'm always in control, and I can always be willing to walk away and be hurt less. And I look back at life and now reflect and say to myself how much on life I miss out on, the beauty of what could really be an experience had I allow myself to put love and take the risk of not being loved in return. And again, going back to detaching yourself from the outcome, but just going through the actions and emotions from the fact of it being human and experiencing all the joys, the pains, the uncertainty, the wondrous of all that energy that being a human entails.
Yeah, I heard that same thing. I mean, it's probably, if you look at it literally, it's true. I mean, the one who loves least controls the relationship, and the one who loves more, has to either be willing to accept that lesser love, or not. But because he or she loves more, they stay. But yeah, I never adopted that as a guideline, but I was exposed to that for sure. I mean, it was just, yeah. And you see it happen. Wow, whoever loved least left the relationship. That hurt. So yeah, yeah. It's we humans are a complicated bunch.
And you talk about this in your book, The Culture of Giving. That was a culture of giving that was given to me, and I was too young and immature at that age to really ponder that statement and say to myself, "Well, are you happy? How does that advice work for you?"
Yeah.
But now I won't give that advice to someone because I can tell firsthand it doesn't work. What do you win if you say, well, I've been in 15 relationships in my life and I was never in love and I was able to control every single one of them? I mean, what do you really gain from that? You don't get a prize. There's no, award ceremony presented to you other than the fact that you have to eventually look back and say, what have I lost? What did I miss out on?
Yeah.
What experiences did I not have? I mean, I don't know if you remember this rap group Houdini, and they had this song called One Love. And they had this verse in there that says, better to have loved and to have lost than to never have loved at all.
Yeah.
And I always remember that as one of the things. Like, you look at someone who's older and then they're deaf and they're reflecting on their lives. I don't think I ever met a person that would say, I wish I hadn't loved this much. I wish I had just kept my feelings in and not experienced the power of what love does. But we kind of getting to the top of the hour, and I want to give an opportunity for you to talk about what you see as growth steps that people can begin to look at how to incorporate love in their lives, or from the topic that we discussed, what does love have to do with it? What are some of the next steps that can put action behind that?
Yeah, so I would say take one at a time of the three definitions of love we began, this show with, and that are in chapter 1 of the book. So again, the joyful acceptance of belonging. So with that one, actually just look at your life and ask yourself, to whom or to what, or with whom or with what, do I joyfully accept belonging? Do I joyfully accept myself? That's a hard, if you can't love yourself, forget about loving anybody else. It doesn't work, and we know that. I mean, that's been around for I'll say millennia, but I'm making that part up. Been around for a long time. So, to whom or what, or with whom or what, do you joyfully accept belonging? That's one. For whom are you willing to extend yourself, go out of your way? And what are the fears you have around the limitations you place on love? So in other words, if you do love yourself and your family, you've chosen, like, let's say your spouse and your kids, if you have a family, how far beyond that do you go in terms of community, colleagues at work, the larger population of your city or state or country, whatever it is? So what are you, just notice your limitations. Don't judge yourself. Love yourself, but just notice, to whom or what do you joyfully accept belonging? For whom or what are you willing to move outside of your comfort zone? And what are the fears that may be getting in the way? And deal with one of those at a time. And maybe make some progress. Oh, today I'm going to joyfully accept belonging to the cashier at ShopRite or Giant or whatever stores you have where you live. Just pick something to work on. Little steps of love. They don't have to be, not talking about romance and intimacy yet, but just to extend yourself to these other human beings. That's, I think, the place to start. Maybe it's with a tree, to just look at a tree sometime, especially an old tree that's hundreds of years old, and consider that work of art, what a tree really is, or a dog, or whatever. So find a place where you joyfully accept belonging, and how can you expand beyond it?
Beautiful advice, definitely. And it's sad that it takes getting older to understand the wisdom and just observing life. And like you say, looking at the old tree and recognizing the beauty in that, it reminds me of a poem. Again, Rumi once said that, for those who the trained eye, and I'm paraphrasing, not quoting correctly, but he said they look out the window and the trees and the grass are dancing. And to the untrained eye, everything is still. And that's what I look at a person who's not tapped into the energy of love. You don't recognize the rhythmic movement of nature if you're not tapped into the energy of love. Again, not love from, we talk about intimacy and romance, but more from the action of the verb of servitude and gratitude and being grateful and loving the fact that you're alive and you can be grateful in the space at the things that you have, and you recognize, like you say, you can see a little dog and see the love in the dog's eyes, that should bring you some form of joy. And that, as we always say, that quest for peace of mind, because we always want to get to the peace of mind. That's what most people always say they want. What do you really want in the day? I want a peace of mind, right? Because all the noise and things that's going on in their heads on a regular basis. So thank you again for another wonderful topic. I'm definitely going to go back and reread where you're talking about love in your book, so I can really talk about and really get a better, deeper, richer understanding of those three areas you laid out. Because at the end, the sense of belonging is critically important. I talk about that in tribes, right? And I still advocate people to build their own tribe. I think you build your own tribe, that you intentionally built of people you're aligned with, you're going to get much more out of life and much more fulfillment from those connections than you would of the tribes that come in our lives organically or just haphazardly because of family or environment or work or whatever the situation may be that brought people into your life.
Yeah, beautiful.
Well, we reached a point where we want to, again, the part of the show where we share an example of someone with his past or present who has exhibited or is exhibiting the characteristics and the behaviors of becoming more fully human. So I'll throw you the ball first, Reggie.
Yeah, so I'm going to mention someone that you and I both know. In fact, it's the person who introduced us, my good friend and co-founder of Fully Human, Kent Frazier, who, Kent is the father of two beautiful kids who are respectively, I think, 7 and 4 now, or 7 and 5. And, his early life was spent in the corporate world. He was an executive vice president for talent and human resources at a couple of different corporations, and, made decent money, and began walking away from it in around 2012 or so. And went back for a while and walked away from it again in the late 20 teens. And just, every day gets up and he's a single dad. So he has a wonderful co-parenting arrangement with his former wife, but it's not easy. And because he's no longer getting a corporate paycheck, and he makes his living as a coach, and when we teach the Fully Human program together, which is not particularly, it's not a big income generator yet. There's some struggle in his life. And he gets up every day and he loves his kids, and he bumps into his, own shadow, and he works with it, and he really practices the things that he teaches and preaches. So I just find Kent to be an extraordinarily fully human being, whom I love dearly.
I concur with that. I think Ken is definitely a wonderful person. And without him, you and I wouldn't be having this podcast.
Yeah.
The show title, Fully Human Connections, is a combination of what he was bringing and what I was bringing. So his essence will always be a part of the show for that. I would say, I'm going to go the direction of, I don't know if I said this before, but Bob Marley, the singer, songwriter, poet. And I say Bob Marley because the topic of love today is that I can honestly say I love his music, and I love the feeling that I get from when I listen to a lot of his songs, because he speaks of love in his songs. 3 birds outside my window, saying 3 words. He took, and that's what I really love, artists who can really take what's in them in the context of their spiritual connection to the creator to get the energy flow, and they share it with the world in such a way that it becomes forever. Like, even though Bob Marley passed away over 30 years ago, his spirit, his energy is still here. And I challenge anyone to listen to one of his songs and have, as you talk about, those shadow elements still in their heart of greed, of hatred, and things of that nature. So when I hear Bob Marley, and he's also, like I said, universally loved. Everywhere I've been on the planet, I've been, to Asia, to, of course, Africa and Jamaica and South America, and Bob Marley's loved. The songs are loved, even though I don't think those folks can even understand English, but they still can understand the melody from his songs and the energy he brought to his songs, and they get that love from that. So that'd be my person, I believe, exhibited fully human, and can help keep me on the path when I need to be uplifted. I'm going to put one of his songs on, and it never fails to give me the energy I need to get connected with the source of love.
Yeah, as soon as you said his name, the 2 words that popped up for me were "One Love." Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's a song title. I mean, that's I probably don't have I'm not as familiar with his whole catalog as you are, but I'm familiar enough with it. So as soon as you said his name, "One Love" came right. There it is, one love. And he wasn't talking about that one person I'm going to marry. That wasn't what he was talking about. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you again, Reggie, for bringing an extra topic to the show. Again, for writing a book, for always being present, always being fully engaged in our conversations. And like I said, I constantly learn each time we have these conversations. I constantly get value, and I definitely appreciate it. I don't take it for granted. So thank you for that.
Yep, you're welcome, and I appreciate your wisdom and your ability to both ask me questions that I haven't thought of before, and just your willingness to kind of just riff and follow where we're going. So I'm really grateful, and I continue to learn. And I'm not just saying that as a quid pro quo, but I continue to learn because you and I come at some really similar topics from different experiences, and that's an important way to learn as well. So I'm really grateful for that. So thank you as well.
Absolutely. And I know you made a pick last week about, I believe you picked the Knicks. Was that your pick as far as?
So much for love. There goes love out there. What I said was, I think I was really clear. I said because I have an emotional tie to New York because I was a sophomore in high school when they won the championship in 69-70. So I'll always have that emotional connection to Reed, Frazier, Bradley, Barnett, DeBusschere, and the rest. That would be my preference, but I didn't make a rational selection. I didn't bet any money on them. Let's put it that way.
Well, yeah, I wasn't a teacher on it, So it's interesting to see how things are going now, and I enjoy the playoffs. It's the only time to get a chance to listen to things in the morning that are not in my personal growth repertoire. I want to hear the analysis of the game before I do anything else, just because I want to get that out of the way. And I took the opportunity as we wrap this show up to play with my dog and listen to a podcast and talk about, because I can't play with my dog and do a podcast on personal growth because I want to catch everything and I need to be present with the dog. But I can't listen to a podcast about sports analysis and be present with the dog and achieve both goals. And I enjoy this time of year because it's that debate, it's the uncertainty of what sports bring to the table, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. Good.
Well, thank you, listening audience, for listening to another episode of the Fully Human Connections podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Definitely, I advise everyone to heed the steps that Richard talked about, because love is definitely, as he said, and answering my question, it's at the beginning, it's at the end of your journey, but it's also throughout the journey that you're going to go through, and you're going to experience it in different ways, in different at different times along that journey. And the wiser you come, the more you appreciate it. So hopefully everybody engage with us on YouTube, LinkedIn. Put your comments. We definitely want to hear them. Definitely appreciate it. And it's next week, Wednesday at 10 a.m. I wish everyone a more productive and blessed week. And Reggie, take care. I wish the same for you.
Thank you, King.